And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to NFA Live episode number, who knows? But we've done a few of these so far. Don't adjust your set. There are only two of us today. Ben, unfortunately, is not feeling too well. So he was going to be hosting it today, but couldn't. But Rob and I, we did think maybe we just won't do it today. Maybe we'll skip a week. It's obviously not the same without Ben. But then we kind of thought it's been a great week for once. We got what we wanted. We got green candles. So it felt a bit. It didn't feel right not to at least come on and do a short stream for you guys and talk about it a little bit. Talk about some of the good news. After an interesting week. Anyway, Rob, how are you, man? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm happy that we finally, it seems like all that hard work that we've done forever is finally just starting to pay off. And it's fun for me to see is the people who have never been through a real crappy bear market, and they get into a bull run. They're like, what the hell is this? And then they're like, that was someone said in one of the chats, they said, this was a face melting rally. I can't believe how high it went. I'm like, oh, you think this is great? Just you wait, because it's going to get much, much better. So this is fun. This is fun times for us.
Yeah. This is I think a little taster of what is to come a bit further down the line. I think we're not quite there yet. I think let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it has been a really good week. And as people are pointing out in the comments, this is just not one for Ben to miss, is it? Bitcoin dominance is right up. You'd imagine that if he was feeling okay, he'd just be on top of the world.
Oh yeah.
So it's.
You're right. I'm looking at his website right now, and I can see that Bitcoin, because like I said, I always steal all this stuff, and I can just see perfectly. Where is it? This one right here. If you could share this.
Yep.
Look at these. Oh, let me blow this up. Bitcoin dominance today, and that's. Let me see. Bitcoin dominance, 52 point, almost 53%, and that's without stables. With stables, I think I want to say we hit 60%. Let me go back. No, 58.85. So, even though he's sick, and I know why he's sick. He's sick because he's got 4 kids, and they're running around. They're always giving him the cold or the flu or something like that. So I can just tell that if he was healthy, he would love to have been here.
Yeah, poor Ben. Well, yes, as a few people are asking in the comments, Ben, as Rob said, Ben isn't feeling too well today. Maybe he's just been so overcome by seeing that Bitcoin dominance go as high as it has, that he's just unable to even function. But more likely, I think he's picked up some nasty bug from one of his kids, and is just laid low with that. But Ben will return. Hopefully next week. So it's been a great week, hasn't it? It's been obviously all the excitement around the ETF is the reason, and I think it was kicked off, wasn't it, by BlackRock? Someone spotted, this was the weird thing. It's sort of initially we thought that perhaps that BlackRock had registered with the DTCC. Right. Registered the ETF with the DTCC, and then it was pointed out that it's actually been registered for weeks or even months now, and it's just no one's noticed.
Yep, I saw that. It was registered since I want to say August, and then and everybody was freaking out, which that's what crypto Twitter does. That's what crypto Twitter is great at. It shares a story, and of course the full information, be damned, doesn't matter. And of course it just went viral. And then, of course, for some reason, didn't it get taken down for a little bit?
Yes, I think it did. And then it got put back. It's almost like they wanted to mess with crypto people's heads.
Man, Larry Fink, I don't know if he's if he's the best manipulator out there, but I got to tell you, when everything was kind of going down and they made the rounds on the publications, the MSNBC, the CNBCs, and he was there, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this sounds pretty good. And then, of course, DTCC listing, everybody talks about that. Maybe he leaked that to somebody, and then he's like, let's just take it down for a bit. They take it down for a bit, and then, of course, it crashes a little. People get to buy back in, and then up it goes. I don't even know what the price is today. I'm going to guess we're looking pretty good.
Yes, let me just share my screen, and we will get it up there so everyone can see it, as if people haven't been looking at it all day long. But we'll share it there anyway. There's CoinGecko. Just hovering a little above 34K. And obviously it touched 35K on Tuesday, I think it was, and then sort of got rejected at that level. But certainly has kind of held on to those gains for the last few days. Ethereum, I think, ETH is still, is going lower against BTC, which I'm sure is something Ben would also point out if he were here.
This is true. Hey, Guy, can you switch it over to instead of denominated by dollars? Can you switch it over to Bitcoin? Here, I got it.
Have you got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me add. I'll add your screen when it's ready.
There it is. Hit that up. So like over here, and on for everybody who's at home, if you ever want to do this, on CoinGecko in the top right hand corner, it'll have the denominations of different. Let me put this in. Different dollar amounts. So you can put it in the dollar, the yuan, the yen, the ruble, whatever reason. And then if you scroll down, you can put it into Ether or EOS and whatever else. Put it in a Bitcoin, and then you can see like what is, as Ben always talks about, what is bleeding against Bitcoin. And I got to tell you, so if we're taking a look at Bitcoin today, just today, in the last 24 hours, you can see that actually Ethereum's not doing too bad. Now, 7 days, it's looking pretty awful. 2.4. Of course, Tether is tethered. 11% down, 8.0.8. So there are a little bit, holy smokes. Dogecoin is up 12.7 against Bitcoin. Again, this is 24 hours. If we take a look at 7 days, 2.9, pretty green. I'll take it.
Absolutely. But I mean, it's still it's telling that ETH is still kind of struggling against Bitcoin, isn't it? Because with this, we talked about this last week, didn't we? Obviously, Ethereum as a network is up against it at the moment, reduced activity, and that means obviously reduced fees. Although I think I did see. Let me see if I can pull up Ultrasound Money, because I think someone was pointing out that that ETH went deflationary again, but that might just be no. It is still inflationary, it's been a great week nonetheless. Even if I think all the momentum is largely with Bitcoin, the narrative is all around the Bitcoin ETF. But
true.
It's great to be able to celebrate some green, and I think it's amazing really that this ETF narrative is still so strong, because I mean, obviously it's the news earlier this week about this listing with the DTCC. And there was also speculation that BlackRock was going to start seeding the fund as well. I think someone had picked up on that, and a few people got excited about that, thinking, "Oh well, BlackRock's going to be buying an absolute ton of Bitcoin," and that was quickly sort of corrected. Like if they seeded the fund, as I understand it, they wouldn't really do it with an awful lot. It wouldn't translate into a massive Bitcoin buy, but still, that was enough to get people excited. But I guess thinking about it, really, what those two things show is that BlackRock is very, very confident that is getting ready for its ETF to list. But if we think about it, I mean, did we ever think anything different? I mean, I think we always assumed that BlackRock knew more than we do, wouldn't have applied for this ETF if it didn't think it had a damn good chance of getting listed. So I guess in a way, has anything fundamentally changed? I'm not sure, but what it's been enough to do is to change sentiment. And I think that the one of the most uplifting stories of the week was that crypto sentiment flipped to its highest level since Bitcoin's all-time high, which I think is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, I think, and if you take a look, let's see here. I always like to. We were talking about this a couple of days ago, the fear and greed index. And it's something I always forget about. I like how this is kind of laid out, because we can see that it lays it out over the price. And what I find always fascinating is today are we at extreme greed or just greed? Just greed, not too bad.
Just greed.
But but remember, everybody, because like you can be over here and have extreme greed. This is 16th November 2020, and the price was $16,740. And of course, that is that extreme greed. And then of course we come over here and we have extreme fear at 26,830 on June of 2022. Yeah. So it's all the things that we're doing, especially you at home watching this video. You've probably been buying a little bit. You've probably been holding for a lot of it. And you know that these types of things, these greeds and fears, it really doesn't play into a factor if we have a long enough time horizon. And that's the big thing. I think this is where everything gets paid off, which is at this point of a jubilation, especially with perhaps an ETF, and who knows what else is coming down the pipe. Yeah.
It's been a really positive week of news so far for crypto, at any rate. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to pick up on today. Just reminding anyone who's joined us, Ben is not being made to stand in the naughty corner for not predicting the pump. Ben just isn't feeling very well today, unfortunately, but is with us in spirit. He's with us. His Into the Cryptoverse website that Rob is getting this data from is standing in as a sort of proxy for Ben. So Ben is with us in spirit, if not actually. Another headline, Rob, that caught my eye today that I think is worth talking about, and I think this is very relevant to what we've been talking about in regards to the ETF, is this one that I saw from Cointelegraph, the ever reliable Cointelegraph, about the Magnificent Seven tech stocks taking a real beating overnight. Alphabet, as you can see in the subheadline there, fell almost 10%, and basically off the back of a some pretty bad earnings calls, which calls into question, I guess, the correlation between Bitcoin, between crypto and tech stocks, which appears to be breaking down pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to rejoice, because we've always talked about this. Like, how long have we talked about, there's going to be a decoupling. People are going to finally figure it out. They're going to realize that these tech stocks are a little bit more risky than getting into some of the hardest assets, or the hardest asset ever created, which would be Bitcoin, and maybe some altcoins moving forward. But yeah, it's amazing that it's funny. Like, we always talk about how technology has to catch up at some point. So remember when, Guy, you were in way before me, but in 2017, it was a narrative of like, this is the big thing. And of course, Bitcoin is great. It's a for peer-to-peer transactions, we kind of figured out it really wasn't that great. Then we started to get into the store of value narrative, like, well, it's a great store of value. Then it was a hedge against inflation. And then you could see like how people would get it, but they just didn't get it. And then all of a sudden it's, had a big meteoric rise 2017, then it dropped off in 2018. And then we heard the same thing. There's going to be a decoupling because people are going to figure out the technology is there. 2021 comes along. The MicroStrategies come in. El Salvador comes in. We hear rumblings of institutions coming in. So we're like, okay, this is definitely the time it's going to decouple. And it doesn't decouple. And now we get here. And now all of a sudden, because of let's be honest, Larry Fink comes in, BlackRock. You've got ARK Investments. You got Fidelity coming in. And then people say, okay, now there's going to be a decoupling. And I was like, I've heard this before. Let's see if it actually happens. And I'll be damned if it didn't happen today. So it's just like just catching up with that technology of what it is. It takes so long. And I think That's the frustrating part, because we know where things are going. We just don't know when it's going to actually be there. And that's the whole thing with time in the market is more important than timing the market. And this is a prime example of that. So yeah, I can definitely see it. And then like, if you could throw up my screen real quick, I can show you that, as far as like a correlation for stocks and things like that, you can, again, like what's great about this is you can take an asset of Bitcoin, you can compare it against a tech stock like Apple. And of course, if it's zero, it's not correlated. If it's negatively correlated, it does the exact opposite. So if Apple went up, Bitcoin would go down. And if it was positively correlated up to 1, it means it would do the same thing. Apple goes up, Bitcoin goes up. And you can just see that, over time, and of course it definitely widely fluctuates, but right now in one of the most pressing times of the market, you can see that right now we're at negative 0.40. Let's see if I can pull up like NVIDIA. And see how that is. And yeah, you can see it again. Sure enough. I mean, of course, you can just use your eyeballs and just take a look at the price action itself. But yeah, you can see that, yeah, as far as like correlations, it looks like things are decoupling and it's about time, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I mean, I guess the other thing that that this tech stock sort of overnight dump, because I mean, bear in mind, obviously, this Magnificent Seven, it used to be FANG, didn't it? And then kind of Netflix went out of favor, Facebook changed its name, and obviously NVIDIA came along. But this Magnificent Seven has basically been propping up the S&P 500 for the last however many months or year or so.
Right.
So does this signal, perhaps, is this a strong signal that a recession is now looking more likely? Tech stocks dumping, which have been the kind of cornerstone of the stock market for so long now, is a recession getting more likely as a result, do you think?
I always thought a recession was in the cards, but again, just like what we talk about technology, the question always is when. I think we're all pretty good at figuring out like where things are going. We just don't know the exact dates, and that's where it gets a little tricky. So like for me, I always thought it was going to be Q1 2024. And then we took a look at some analysis. We took a look at, between the Fed pivot time to a recession. And then we took a look at from the Fed pause time to a recession. And the average time from a pause to an actual recession is a year and 2 months. And then from a pivot to a recession is right under a year or so. So we started to pause in August. Actually, July was the last Fed rate. And then there was no... then there was no meeting in August and September. So if you could go a year later, it would actually put us into like Q3 2024. But then I've heard a couple of different consenting or differing opinions. One was Larry Fink, matter of fact. He came out on Bloomberg and said that, yeah, a recession's coming, but we see it happening more towards the later half of 2025, 2026. He goes, after the Fed comes back in and starts to do quantitative easing. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And I think it was Hayes from the former CEO of BitMEX said the same thing. Said, I believe there's going to be a lot of turmoil, and then in 2020, then we have a massive bull run because of quantitative easing. And then towards the end of 2025, 2026, we get a massive recession. And if that happens, well, this is great for us, but this would be the time that, like, if you ever thought about taking profits and going into the next rally, this would be the time. So don't screw this up, because if it really gets as bad as we think it's going to be, recessions, once they coil up and they keep happening and they keep dipping, especially with the rates, you'd have to definitely be prepared for that and have hard assets, whatever those are for you. So yeah, I can see it. I just don't know when. What your opinion, Guy? What do you think? When do you think is actually going to happen?
Yeah, it's and it's fascinating because I was wondering whilst you were mentioning the Fed, the next meeting I think is coming up at the end of this month, so in about 5 days' time, which is going to be fascinating to see how they react. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Rob. I think a recession is kind of overdue. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. I would say, yeah, probably Q1 2024 would be the most likely time. But as you say, it's like you kind of see these things coming, and then it just sort of it doesn't happen, and you just never, you can never be sure when. I mean, you can never be sure either way, can you? But time does funny things to you, and you sort of, you think, wow, is it not going to happen at all? It kind of tests your patience, and then all of a sudden it kind of comes at once, doesn't it? So I think it's something we still have to be on the lookout for. I'd be, like I've said before, I would be amazed if it didn't happen. But obviously, if it does, that is going to be a lot of pain in the near term. But then, as you say, that's that feeds into Arthur Hayes' theory, doesn't it? That a recession comes, the Fed and other central banks have no other tools at their disposal but to basically start QE again, and the cycle continues.
That's right. So but if they do that again, that means that we go deeper into debt. America's already $33+ trillion. So there's only so much that we can possibly do before you got to pay the piper at some point. And if you push it off, you can keep doing it, but it's just going to get uglier. And that's hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah. That's something else I've been seeing. I did see an article about this, but it was behind a paywall in the Times. But this article was pointing out that obviously the bond market is not in a good way at the moment, and the debt, US debt is at record levels, UK debt is at record levels, and one of the interesting things it cited was the UK's sort of aging population. We've got a huge kind of pensions bill to pay, and that's the same or worse in a lot of countries, particularly in so-called Western countries. And this debt, we're sitting on a kind of debt time bomb. And when you factor in everything that's happening in Ukraine, everything that's happening in the Middle East and could still happen in the Middle East, and how much money that is going to cost in so many different ways, there are still storm clouds on the horizon, aren't there?
Yeah, there is, and it's a good thing that it's a good thing that we're into crypto and digital assets, especially more so Bitcoin, because it's one of the hardest assets that's out there. And even if there was a talk about gold versus Bitcoin, which usually comes up, and I think it was one of the analysts at Ernst & Young, and they said very, very clearly, they said even if the price of gold goes up, and you're using that as a hedge against inflation, which is great, what'll happen is people will just find a way to mine more gold. It'll be more expensive, but they can do that. They said, fortunately or unfortunately, you can't do that with Bitcoin. There's only 21 million. You can't move the miners any faster. This is just how it is. And that's why I think it'll win in the end of the day. Yeah.
It was interesting to see Pomp on CNBC. I think it was yesterday. I thought he did a good job of talking about it to those guys, explaining it to those guys, and I think when we're in this space, we're so used to it. We've heard, there will only ever be 21 million is kind of our daily mantra, isn't it? But there are still a heck of a lot of people out there, the majority of people out there, I think, who have yet to realize this. That has yet to register.
You know what else? You're right. You know what else, Guy? I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and he was saying, "Hey, when's Dogecoin going to pump?" Because that's all he knows. And I said, well, at some point I probably will. I like Dogecoin. He said, yeah. He goes, I get Bitcoin, but it's too expensive. And I said, well, it's too expensive, what you think it is, but later on. He's like, well, I can't afford $33,000. I was like, oh, and this is the thing I always forget to do is like, you can buy $20 worth or $30 worth or $10 worth. He's like, can you? I said, yeah, there's, got 100 million Satoshis. And I said, it's like a, there's 100 pennies for $1. There's 100 million Satoshis for a Bitcoin. I go, if you just do that, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. He goes, I'll look into that and buy it that way. I think and I always say this, I always forget to do this. If we could do this a little bit better, like everybody watching at home too, to tell people that, I think more people would probably get into Bitcoin and say, oh, I didn't know I thought I had to pay, $34,000 for one.
Yeah. And I think people realizing that you don't have to own a whole Bitcoin. I mean, for one thing, it would be impossible for even a tiny fraction of humanity to own a whole Bitcoin. Not only were there is it limited to 21 million, but several million of those have been lost forever. So it's actually even lower. But I think if people, once people understand that you don't need to own a whole Bitcoin in the future, to have that hedge, I think that, that narrative, that it'll get even more desirable. People will just want to own a piece. And I mean, it is a bit of a meme, isn't it? However many sats are enough or whatever. But I think it's true. People will gradually come round to that understanding.
I think so. And what else is a meme too is I've seen this a lot is people say, oh, it's there's a huge pump and I didn't fill my bags enough. I'm just gonna tell everybody right now, you will never ever feel like you pumped your bags or bought enough before the next bull run happens. It could take 2 or 3 more years and you'd be like, oh, if I just had that extra month. So just be happy with what's about to happen.
Yeah. And look, make sure that if you are filling your bags, you're doing it to an extent that you can afford, because there are plenty of people on social media everywhere saying they're throwing however many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars or whatever into it. That's them. You guys out there have to invest what you can afford to lose, as we say, isn't it? But everyone's liquidity situation is different. So what else was? By the way, folks, by anyone watching, if you have any questions for Rob and myself, do leave them in the comments, and we will try and answer a few.
Let's do some Q&A. That's what people are here for.
Absolutely. Whilst we wait for some people to leave some questions, let me bring up the other bit of news that I thought it might be worth just touching on today. Everyone's favorite person in crypto, none other than this guy, the man with the perennial bad hair day, Sam Bankman-Fried. This, I think, is interesting. A few members of Team Coin Bureau are attaching quite a lot of significance to the fact that SBF is going to be taking the stand in his own trial. So, as I understand it, this is he's going to be quizzed. This is for the prosecution. He's appeared. The defense case I don't think has started yet. So he's appearing as a sort of prosecution witness. But firstly, Rob, do you think, given everything that he sort of said last year in the wake of FTX's collapse, is this a good idea? This feels like a real Hail Mary pass on the part of SBF.
From what I glean from you guys over at Coin Bureau, and from what I hear from Tiffany Fong, she does a great job following along with what's happening. It's looking pretty bad already. I mean, the people who have already taken the stand have been pretty damning. And it looks like he is going to go down regardless. Now, if it's the lawyers and they came up to him and go, look, there's only one chance here. And it's you have to throw yourself at the mercy of the court. Because he's been very apologetic, like, oh, I just got to wait. I can't do a good impersonation, guy. You do a better impersonation. But he's like, I'm really sorry about this, and things just got away from us, and I thought this was happening. I think it's the only way that they can do it to kind of get some leniency without him, being in jail for decades and decades and decades. So it was probably a good plan by the lawyers and say, look, there's no way out of this, and the only way that we can do this is to minimize collateral damage. And that means you have to go up there and be humble and do your best. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter at all, because even if he goes to jail, what does that do for people's portfolios? Not too much. Really what people really care about is, people want him to go to jail, and he will, but really what it comes down to is, what does that mean for me? How am I going to get my funds back? And I think that is the bigger issue. So we're here with the gossip part, and that's great. The next part is, when do I get made whole? And I think that really comes down to all the money that was lost, and hopefully they can pull in 3 Arrows Capital and all the rest of the pieces of trash that were out there that allowed this to happen. So, yeah. Anyhow, but Guy, do you think this is like a good idea? Or this is a horrible idea for him to do?
but from everything I've seen over the past year, I think it's a horrible idea. But I don't think they've got any choice. From what I've been seeing and hearing, as you say, like watching Tiffany's videos and just kind of keeping up with what's been going on in the case in general. You know, as I understand it, the witnesses for the prosecution have been pretty compelling of it. I think Caroline Ellison was obviously the big one.
Yeah.
Saying, you know, this was going on for a lot longer than people thought, which is, you know, exactly what, you know, SBF doesn't want people to hear. So, and then reading how his lawyers were sort of finding it difficult to really land blows on any of the witnesses and, you know, discredit them in any way. So, yeah, I mean, as I understand it, it has been looking pretty bad for him. So I guess this has the sense of a real kind of last roll of the dice, I guess. What other choice has he got? As you say, you know, go up there, try and convince the people on the jury that really he's just, you know, a bit of a bumbling fool who screwed up. And I mean that's the crazy thing, though, isn't it? Because, you know, the way it works, they have to convince all the members of the jury in order for him to get the maximum sentence, which, you know, I think he deserves. They have to convince the juror a unanimous decision on all counts. So if even one juror thinks, well, I'm just not sure, you know, that is reasonable doubt. So I guess maybe their game is to just get him up there, see if they can at least wobble a couple of jurors, maybe on a couple of points, cut his sentence down to, you know, mid double figures or something like that, and see if they can just, you know, maybe avoid a triple figure sentence. But
yeah, maybe they can find that one understanding chubby vegan just like Sam, and they can say, okay, I get it. You're low on protein. You're low on, and you're anemic. So maybe that's the issue. I don't know, but yeah, I do hope he gets what's coming to him. But again, you know, all the people that were affected, it's one step on that road to getting everything back, I guess.
Yeah, and I think as cathartic as seeing him go down for a long time would be for, you know, people who are affected by that, it wouldn't be nearly as cathartic as them actually getting their money back. There has been kind of positive news on that, hasn't there? Because, I mean, there was a lot of excitement around the Anthropic investment. It seems like, you know, there is a chance that maybe he made it all back on one trade with this investment in Anthropic, which is it Amazon that's trying to buy them for billions upon billions of dollars, and
I believe so.
Or are they just going public?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure on this one behind the scenes, but like what you said is that, you know, that one trade to bring it all back. Isn't that what everybody's trying to do? So, I mean, everybody calls us degens, but geez Louise, I mean, that's just the normal, that's just the standing operating procedure for most people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll just do a couple of audience questions as well. It's a bit of a shorter stream this week, guys. Obviously, as you'll notice, Ben is not with us, and usually he would have gone into great detail about Bitcoin dominance levels by this point. But Rob and I don't need to touch on that. So we have a question, an expected one from Yuvaraj. Do you think it is the start of bull market? Is this the beginning? Rob, do you want to? What are your thoughts on this?
You know what? It's a funny thing. Like we talked about this a couple of days ago, because everybody talks about a bull run, and the bull run's here, and this is the bull run. So you have to define what a bull run actually is. So if you take a look at the definition, you can see that it's public sentiment is very positive, and there's an ongoing belief that there's a rising appreciation of prices. On top of that, there is a 20% appreciation of price action from the low to whatever the price actually is. So 20%, but that is in traditional finance. And we know that 20% is a Tuesday in crypto. It's not a big deal when we have that. So like if I take a look at it, I see myself, well, okay, is the public sentiment very positive? Well, we took a look at the fear and greed index. We can see that, yes, we're in the greed. So yeah, it's very positive. Is there a belief that there is ongoing price appreciation? Well, yes, there actually is. And have we seen, price appreciation over since the all-time lows? Well, the all-time low was November of 2022, and that was $15,700, and that was, all roughly a year ago. And now we're up, I guess, 108, 106%, somewhere around there. So if you take a look at those factors and you say, well, is it a bull run? Is it a bull market? Yes, by definition, it actually is. However, remember this, and I actually showed this I did a tweet where just what we did with Guy, we put everything in denominated in Bitcoin. You can see that everything was bleeding as far as the alts. Now today it's a little bit different, so we'll see if that actually holds true. But I think there is, by definition, it would be a bull market. And the question is, I always think to myself is, what could derail that? And I have to tell you, everybody, I'm very biased because I didn't think it was going to be a bull market here. I was always dollar cost averaging, but I was hoping for a longer time. Again, that question, do we ever have enough time? So we'll see how it works out as far as like recessions and wars and the happenings that are going on in the Middle East. But yeah, that's the definition.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Which actually leads us on to another question that who is Jess had. Do you think Bitcoin or crypto will survive World War III?
I'll give this to Guy.
What's that?
I'll give this to you. You take this one.
Yeah. I should say as well, like one of the really worrying things over the last few weeks has been the fact that the phrase World War III gets mentioned so often nowadays, and I think it's kind of accelerated a bit, this narrative since everything that happened in Israel at the beginning of this month, and it is a really, really worrying time. Do I think World War III is around the corner? I'm going to be the eternal optimist and say no, because I think the stakes are just too high for everyone involved. But do I think Bitcoin or crypto will survive World War III? Yes, but I think in a greatly reduced state. I think Bitcoin certainly would. This is something I think people have speculated on this a lot. And one of the questions that comes up, one of the great things about Bitcoin is obviously that it's trustless, it's permissionless, it doesn't require any intermediary. All it requires really is an internet connection, and you can send value to anyone in the world. So the natural question that comes up is, well, what if there's no internet? And the scenario that usually comes up for no internet is that all the servers have been nuked, and it hasn't survived. Talking to people who know more about the internet and this sort of global connectivity than I do, as I understand it, it would actually be very, very difficult to shut off the internet entirely. And part of the reason for that is that it is so decentralized. And if you need an example of why decentralization is so important, why us crypto people bang on about it all the time, it is because a central point of failure is so vulnerable. So the internet is decentralized and thus hard to kill. Bitcoin is decentralized and thus hard to kill. So I think Bitcoin, by its decentralized nature, would be in the best position by far of any cryptocurrency to survive World War III, which, God willing, never happens. But it is a fascinating thing to think about. But yeah, as long as the internet exists in some form, then Bitcoin will still be usable. And I think another thing that's interesting is now that internet, it used to be utilities, water and electricity, and maybe sewage or something like a sewage system. I think nowadays it's becoming more and more common. Fast internet is becoming a utility that most people just cannot do without anymore. It's just becoming more and more ubiquitous, and I think that also points the way for a bright future for crypto as well, because the internet has gone from being something that a privileged few had to being a bit of a luxury, to being in many ways an absolute necessity for existence, and that is only going to become more so. We're not going to go backwards from here.
Exactly. And I'll just say like this, like for our rental properties, for our Airbnb, we put a picture of the speed of the internet within the actual categories or with the actual listing. So like it's nice to see like the beaches and the rooms and the kitchen. But if you don't have that in there, I think people are like, well, what's the internet? Because we get the question all the time. We got it so much, we just put it, here's the top speeds, uploads and downloads. And that's what can contribute to actually people, just what you said, people, it's a necessity. People have to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's just take one more question then.
Yes.
I thought this was an interesting one from Bullish Future. Since BTC is so limited, as we were talking about earlier, do you ever worry that the next bull run you may be selling sats you'll never get back? Now, I thought this was an interesting one because I think we talked, it might have been last week, we were talking about how obviously, Bitcoin front runs precedes the rest of the market. And I think Ben was saying how, if you allocate to Bitcoin now or, in advance, then, you get those gains first, and then you can rotate some of those into alts. And I think this question is, well, yeah, but would you want to do that? I mean, that may be your only option if Bitcoin is everything that you're invested in. You're not sitting on any cash or stable coins or what have you. But I think this is a good question because Bitcoin is becoming such a hard asset. And as Larry Fink says, a flight to safety, a flight to quality. So yeah, Rob, I mean, is this something that that's weighed on your mind at all? Like, if you do rotate into alts for this bull market, that might be it. They might then come out of reach, given the demand that there is for Bitcoin.
Constantly, guy. I'm not kidding. I constantly worry about that because I constantly worried about that in 2017. I constantly worried about that in 2021, and I'm worrying about it now going into the next bull market. The question always is because there's only so much to go around. There's only so many millionaires out there, and I think it's like over, what is it, 200 and some million millionaires that are out there. Even for every millionaire, there's not enough for them to own one full Bitcoin. I think when everybody understands that, then it is game over. And I think coming in, and that's just it, like coming into this, you look at all these huge heavyweights getting in, like we just talked about. So you think to yourself, is this the last time? And I look at it, and I don't know. And for me, like there's, of course, the reason why we called our show Not Financial Advice, because we can't give financial advice. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know how old you are. I don't know the debt that you have. I don't know your goals. I have no idea. But when I take a look at it and I say to myself, okay, even if I have, 0.10 Bitcoin, if it really becomes that mass adopted, I'm way ahead, and you are way ahead if you have 0.10 of Bitcoin than everybody else on the entire planet. So if you got like 0.15, 0.2, you're probably like, maybe since it is in the white paper, it's a peer-to-peer transaction, maybe I'll take that and I'll pay off my credit cards, because that, 20-some% crazy debt, or maybe my house, or maybe I've got someone else, or I want to put another asset, I want to diversify. I think for that one, yes. So for me, like I always think about it, but I think about that for everything. I think about that for even like, the altcoins that I have. Like, is this it? Is Ethereum going to go as a moonshot? But at some point you have to say to yourself, what are my goals for me and what do I want to do? And for me personally, I am going to be selling between 50 and 80% of all my crypto. I've made this very, very public. There's a link in every one of my descriptions of all my videos of why I'm going to do that, the indicators I'm going to look at, and then move forward. Even if I keep 20%, I think in the future for kids and grandkids, it'll be just fine.
Yeah. Sound not financial advice, but yeah, I think it's so important for people to understand. It's one thing holding this amazing asset, but if you also have tons of debt, if you also have mortgages, I mean, so many people are straddled with things like student loans and things like that. And I think anyone will tell you that if you want to become financially free, financially independent, even just comfortable, your debts are one of the first things you've got to clear. So yeah, it's all about your individual situation. But yeah, I think come there will be great temptation, won't there, when the bull market comes, or ahead of that massive alt season, to sell out of BTC, rotate into alts. Plenty of people will do that. Whether Bitcoin kind of retraces to the level that you might have bought it at prior to that, prior to this next bull market, we just don't know. Although Bitcoin's volatility suggests that it certainly could. But yeah, I will certainly be holding on to the vast majority of my Bitcoin for a very long time. I don't have any plans to sell it, because like we say, I believe in that hard asset. I believe in it's my kind of future proofing, if you like.
See, pretty good idea. You and Simon Dixon got the right way.
We'll be living on the Isle of Man. Okay, well, that's about it for today, folks. Rob, thank you so much for joining the stream, because as I said, we were going to not do it today because Ben wasn't feeling well, but we thought we should just check in with everyone as we get towards the end of what has been a really good week for crypto. Let's hope that continues. But as we've talked about today, there is lots happening in there, lots happening on the macro front that will affect the crypto market in the coming weeks and months. So be prepared, folks, because I think there's a lot of excitement ahead. I think there's probably quite a lot of volatility ahead as well. So take care out there. But Rob, we will be back next week, and I think it'll probably be Ben hosting it, assuming he's recovered.
We'll be back at Ben. He can talk about maybe some Bitcoin dominance, or maybe altcoins are awful, or whatever, and then we'll go from there.
Maybe how ETH continues to bleed against BTC, etc.
Probably so.
And I think the folks, after last week's discussion about nuclear physics, everyone wants a dissertation on chess from him next time as well. There are a few chess questions. I have nothing constructive to offer on chess, so that'll have to be you and Ben.
That'll be just Ben. All right, sounds good.
Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next week. Keep calm and huddle on. Thank you. Thanks,
everybody.